So I don't have many questions because that presentation is so thorough, but I wrote some down and I thought that these would be useful for the audience. Can you describe a little bit about what UTM best practices are, like source versus medium versus campaign? I have a blog article that I'm going to share on that, but like in your mind, how do you usually break down source, medium, and campaign so that they stay consistent?
Yeah, of course. Source, medium, and campaign with UTMs are really, really important because you want to make sure that you use the same things over and over and over again. And this is a common problem that we see. It's the reason why we built the UTM tool. You want to make sure that you predefine your sources and mediums early. So for an example, your source is going to be the place at which this started. So if I have a Facebook ad, Facebook is going to be the source. If I have an email campaign being sent through MailChimp, MailChimp is the source. But what we want to do is have a long list of all of these sources to start with, and we keep using those. Once again, capitalization is important. Everything in analytics should be lowercase. Now to move on past sources, since that is the source at which something started, medium is going to be the method in which something got to you. So if you think about this very similar to flying on an airplane, I bought an airplane ticket with Delta. Delta would be the source. Then the way that I got to San Francisco was on the airplane. So that would be the medium at which I got there. So when you think about the things, how did you deliver this method or this thing to the person? But you want to make sure sources and mediums are very well thought out in advance so that way you don't have any problems. If you use our UTM tool, we already have presets in there. So if you try to type email, it locks you into something. You type Facebook, it locks you into another thing. And then as well as we're making a team presets feature so you can force anybody on your team, Dom, to always use Facebook as a medium. But you just want to stay consistent and always use lower cases. Never use capital letters in anything you do with analytics.
Okay, cool. That's awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely pop the link for the Chrome extension in there.
Thanks.
And then, so you mentioned a little bit about this, like with Kissmetrics and Google Tag Manager. Like, what if I don't have a dev? You also mentioned something recently that Mixpanel now has auto capture. So can you talk a little bit about that for some teams that might not necessarily have somebody who can do event tracking and they're just looking on the server side? I'm sorry, they're just looking on the client side for like tracking different events throughout the page?
Like in regards to Mixpanel's AutoTrack explicitly?
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't used it, so I can't say a ton.
Okay.
But to my knowledge, it works exactly like Keep.
Okay.
So one of the problems with analytics is obviously a developer, right? You have to have developers. So platforms like Mixpanel have AutoTrack, which track every single element on a page, and then they store that, and later you can come back and do retroactive tracking. What you're going to want to make sure of is that when you think about these things, is that when you do this retroactive tracking, if something changes on your site, such as you change a button color or if you change a button location, it breaks all of that retroactive tracking. Okay. And this is the reason why we warn people like, hey, retroactive is great, but once you make a change on the site, it changes that tracking and you can't necessarily link them together very, very easily. But AutoTrack is great because you never have to worry about setting up events again. You can just do it whenever you have time.
Perfect, yeah, and that's all client-side events, just to be clear, not server-side.
All client-side events. One
thing on that note then is, let's say that I have 3 different register buttons on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
Just to reiterate, those are not 3 different events. That's the same event with 3 different properties with a placement, correct?
If that's if you're using a platform like Mixpanel. Now, if you're using a platform like Kissmetrics, you're typically going to make sure that you have one registered event that covers all of them, and then potentially an event that tracks each one of those. And that's just due to the way that they built their funnels. This will be changing in 2017, but it hasn't changed yet.
Okay. And then, so for example, let's say that we do change something and then it breaks everything. This leads me to a grander question, which is like, what if I already have analytics implemented and now I've watched your presentation and I'm like, oh shit, I've done everything wrong. How do I actually reconcile? Do I just start fresh? Do I try to map the data? What would you suggest if somebody's in that situation?
Typically, I recommend just to start fresh. Whenever we've seen people really try to map things together, they actually don't use that historical data very much. And you're better off just starting out with a clean data set. The way these platforms work is you have a small database connected to the analytics, and it's really hard to import data in there correctly. You can do it, but it just adds more noise. Most of the times, if you're a smaller company, just start over fresh. If you're a bigger company, just keep optimizing, and eventually you're going to use some BI platform anyways. So like, don't overthink it. Try to keep it simple.
Okay, cool. And then speaking of overthinking things, what if my Google Analytics and my Mixpanel say different things?
Yeah, so all analytics platforms are going to tell you different things at all times. You should expect roughly a 5% variance in all of your platforms. And this is because Google Analytics tracks in one way, but if somebody has ad blocker on, Google Analytics can't actually track that person. But then in Mixpanel, you're tracking server side. Well, ad blocker doesn't stop the server from sending in the data. So you should expect discrepancies between many tools. It's very, very normal. Just understand that when you look at a tool, if you set your mark on a metric and no data or like you're not changing your architecture or anything like that, as long as that metric's going up, you're still doing good. It doesn't have to be 100% accurate. You just want to see the good metrics go up and the bad metrics go down.
I've definitely seen some people, including myself, get locked up for hours being like, what the hell's going on?
Don't do that.
Now, in Mixpanel, you mentioned if there's a Boolean like true or false that you would use the date as the property.
Yeah.
Are events, generally speaking, auto-dated or no?
So the events will, the properties are not, and you're not able to actually access those dates of the event. So you're able to say, did this event happen in this time span? But it won't tell you that this event happened at that time. The events don't get a property of time on them.
Okay, perfect. Now, a little bit more advanced, what about merging identities across platforms?
Yeah.
Like, let's say that I have a mobile app, and let's say that I also have a website, and I want to be able to merge the actions that somebody's doing on both of those. What's the best practice for that with Mixpanel, or is it better to lean towards a tool like Amplitude that handles that like more automatically? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I would definitely, if you're really focused on cross-device attribution, it's really, really important you choose the right tool. Platforms like Kissmetrics and Amplitude do a way better job at merging identities together. And they actually literally take the timestamps and shove the two things together, and now you have all these timestamps. Now, this provides an additional layer of problems, though, because over time, as those identities match up, it will change your historical data. So you have to take that into consideration. I was at a board meeting where the metrics were literally changing month over month, and the board was like, this doesn't make sense. And I'm like, you got to remember, as we get more information and they merge, we now know true attribution. So we're making the best decisions we can. But on the flip side of that, if you use a platform like Mixpanel, it cannot merge an identity together at all. It simply now identifies the new device as the originating user and then deletes the history of that new device. So if you're focused on cross-device attribution, which is more focused on acquisition compared to product metrics, you probably don't want to use Mixpanel. Mixpanel is not the best for customer acquisition. It's really good at product stuff. When you dead focus on acquisition, Kissmetrics, Woopra, Amplitude for sure, these products are built to merge identities.
Okay, great. So last question, speaking of attribution, and this is a little bit of a mind bender, more so on the advanced side. You mentioned that the funnel is always tracking if an event happened, if one event happens and then another one happens sequentially, regardless of what happens in between. Now, what happens if I'm curious about what has happened in between and if that's led to the secondary event happening? So for example, somebody sees pricing page B, or they see a testimonial page in between, and then they have a higher likelihood of actually signing up, which is a secondary event. This type of thing is probably not worth it for a lot of early stage startups to track, because all that really matters is like, are there more signups or not? Mm-hmm. But how do you actually try and come up with that attribution as to what leads to conversion or the path to conversion? Do you have any sort of like best practices around tracking that, like grouping properties together to see what the trend is before a certain event, a desired or one metric that matter happens?
Yeah, so the behavior report from Google Analytics is hands down one of the best at doing this, the behavior flow, because you can see the path at which people go about your site. And you can say, I only want to see the path of people that converted. And you can really start to better understand that. So the behavior flow report in Google Analytics is really good. Kissmetrics also has a path report, which will enable you to say, show me the last 5 events before somebody converted. That report is also very, very helpful. I would not say it's perfect, but it definitely is good. Platforms like Mixpanel don't really make this too easy. Kissmetrics is definitely a little bit better at it. I'm actually testing another platform right now called attribution.io. And they're the only attribution platform right now that thinks about attribution in the way that I do, which is touch points. So for an example, every touch point is given a weight. So for an example, direct touch point is only given 1 point, but if you're a referrer, you're given 3 points. And what happens is it measures every touch point of that user, and then it builds me a horizontal bar graph telling me, hey, this is the attribution of users. I've not seen a platform do it that way. Attribution.io is building it out now, predominantly built on top of UTMs and stuff like that. Okay. This is the platform I'm vetting now, which I really like, to see how that works. It gets even more confusing when you have things like retargeting mixed in, because then you have view-through conversions. But so far, attribution.io seems to be very promising. For the only other platforms I know very well, and I don't know if Amplitude does paths very well, but I know Kissmetrics does a decent job.
Yeah, I'm not sure about Amplitude.
Yeah.
And then I guess the last thing too is like, we talked a little bit about your Chrome extension, but will you tell us a little bit more about full profile and also like F&A Amazing? Like I know that most of the clients you work with are usually a little bit larger, but in order to work with F&A Amazing, like when is the right time and stuff like that?
Yeah, of course. So Full Profile is a data enrichment tool. Full Profile enables you to give us an email address and we can tell you 600 things about that person. This could be what their gender is, are they married, do they have kids, all the way to how long have they been employed at their current position, to are they interested in gardening books, which is pretty interesting. I'm interested in gardening books. But it can also tell you firmographic data. So where do they work, how long have they been there, what is the logo of that company, how many people work there, how many patents does that company have, all the way to the technologies that are on that company's site. So is the company using Google Analytics? Does the company have Zendesk? And all you have to do is send us an email using segment.io. If you're using Segment, we're integrated cleanly. Within 1 second of us getting the information, we send you all of this information back. You pipe it through Segment into any tool that you have. So it can go into Mixpanel, MailChimp, Salesforce, Zendesk, doesn't matter. 300 integrations directly through there. So nice and simple. Subscriptions start at $20 a month. We're still in beta, so definitely check it out, fullprofile.io. And then for F&A Amazing, we're an analytics and growth consultancy. We typically work with funded or $1 million revenue startups. Doesn't limit us to that. That's just kind of the stereotypical fit. We focus on helping companies get their analytics strategy set up, implement it, then extract insights, turn those insights into action, and that's where the growth side of our business comes into play. We do everything after somebody hits your site. We don't do paid acquisition. We don't do SEO. When they land on the site, our job is to convert more of them, get them through the onboarding program, and make sure they never cancel. So we focus on everything inside of there.
Okay, perfect. Well, yeah, like I said, this has been super helpful. I'm sure this video will be great. I'm going to stop recording now and then just kind of like say goodbye to you. So then but thank you so much for joining us, okay?
Yeah.
All right.